Have you used it? What does it hope to achieve? Then we'll be looking at continuous delivery pipeline, which I want to focus on in particular. We're going to go through the steps in the pipeline, and I'm going to give you different tips and guidelines for setting up each phase or each step, stage. Then we'll conclude with a few things to consider going forward, and then hopefully we'll have room for questions at the end. So who am I? So I'm a software delivery team lead currently working at Rabobank International. I work for IT Systems London within a front office DevOps team. We're a cross-functional team of developers, business analysts, and environment manager, all co-located in London. And in particular, I'm responsible for the delivery of projects and business as usual. And as a team, we're responsible for delivery all the way through from the initiation of change requests. So from when user requests a change, all the way through the analysis, development, testing, all the way through to release in production. Our applications are effectively it's a trading system, which is a suite of .NET applications, both client and server side. I don't know how many developers we have in the core. It's used by over 700 users across the globe, so in over 16 different locations. It's a set of business critical applications with lots of regulatory requirements. So I'm just setting some context so that you guys have an idea of sort of how what a high pressured environment we work in. Now, at the beginning of our DevOps journey, we had 3 to 4 releases a year, which is very infrequent given the context I've just given you. It took a long time to be able to deliver features to our users. We couldn't confirm to our users. A user would request a feature, we wouldn't be able to confirm to them when that feature would be delivered. We had only one person who was able to deliver our releases. That person we called, codenamed the architect. This architect he would cherry pick changes from our development branches for the release, which is, as I'm sure a lot of you will know, is not a good way to go. We will spend a lot of time in UAT trying to fix these issues and get our builds to really good quality. So it would take us 3 weeks or so to be able to do this for one release. And then this architect would then spend the whole weekend trying to deliver this release. And as you can imagine, guaranteed issues in production afterwards. Would take a couple of days to recover from each release. It was sort of a dreaded thing. We had so many gaps in our testing. Any hot fixes that were required would be patched onto the servers directly, because that was, being a high pressured environment, business critical, that was the quickest way that we could deliver these changes. So basically, we had no confidence in our releases. Now, fast forward a few years, we have production releases every couple of days. We have continuous integration builds running constantly during the day with automated tests and quality checks running on every build, so we can kind of guarantee some level of quality of each build. We're easily able to fix production issues quickly through our pipeline. We have planned release cycle, which is we have planned major releases every year, which we communicate to our users a year in advance. And we have several patches sort of in between every release. And we have a wide variety of testing, both automated and manual. We've got unit tests, integration tests, regression tests, all sorts of tests. We've got really good sort of high quality UAT environments where we can demo changes to our users, or our users can test changes them or features themselves. So the whole pipeline is automated, and we're able to guarantee that the changes that we make or the changes that we build are actually what get delivered to production. So as you can see, it's a far cry from sort of where we started. And all of these things I've talked you through are all the benefits of DevOps. So that's what I'd like to share with you guys today. So I promised taking you through software delivery trends. I'm hoping I'm sort of telling you stuff that you kind of already have an idea of. So I'm sure most people have heard of agile software development. I know a lot of companies have implemented agile methodologies to sort of help take us that one step further to be able to speed up our software delivery process. So what did agile bring us? So agile brought us the whole concept of breaking software changes into sort of the user stories, so small manageable chunks that we can sort of deliver, I guess, to demo to our users. It brought us this concept of iteration. So you're software delivery would be broken into sort of 2-week iterations. The idea was to be able to accelerate the feedback loops to our users and align the product with market needs. So that allowed our users to be able to see something of what they had requested in a shorter space of time, rather than requesting a change, and then getting something 3 months down the line. So even if it takes 3 months to deliver the whole feature, you can sort of break it up into chunks that you can show your user. So the focus of Agile was on a potentially shippable product. And then Agile brought with it this Advent continuous integration. So this whole idea of being able to use a whole practice of checking code more frequently, making lots of little changes, testing each little change, and integrating it several times in sort of into a main release branch. And the whole you sort of needed that in place to be able to get to that point where you can demo changes to your users on a regular basis. So now, what is DevOps then? So DevOps sort of took Agile one step further. So where Agile promised us a potentially shippable product, DevOps has brought us, taken us one step further by delivering on that promise and actually giving us that product in production. So it treats the whole software lifecycle as a single process that can be automated, so that we can eventually deliver those changes to production. So that's one step further on from Agile. And so we've moved away now from continuous integration to now continuous delivery. So those are two things I'm going to be talking about a lot through the course of this webinar. Okay. So what is DevOps? We've taken some time to kind of look at DevOps. I've done this through different lenses. One being the DevOps definition. So DevOps is defined as a software methodology that combines software development, which is the dev part, with IT operations, which is the ops part, to shorten the systems development lifecycle while delivering features, fixes, and updates frequently in close alignment with business objectives. I hope you've got a sense of what that is from sort of what I've been describing. It's a whole idea of delivering software quicker and taking us away from just long software delivery. A good lens through which to look at DevOps is this DevOps core values. So using the mnemonic CAMS, C-A-M-S. So the first element of that is culture, which I think is sometimes the trickiest bit to get right. But once you get this right, then it kind of sort of enables all the others. The whole idea is behind the culture of DevOps is to tighten the feedback loop between development and operations. So whereas traditionally you'd have your different disciplines sitting separately, you'd have your business analyst doing analysis on a change, then he would throw it over the fence. Once he was done to the developer, who would go away, make his own changes, throw his change over the fence to the tester, who would test. Then he's done his job, he throws it over to those ops guys over there who are going to release to production. And once those guys are done, they move it over to these support guys, who are going to look after the application. Each person, once they've got their bits, they sort of wash their hands off everything. They've moved on. But the whole culture of DevOps is to kind of pull these different teams together, work together within one team, and have shared responsibility for delivery. The second thing is, or elements of the core values, is automation. I mean, automation. DevOps is all about that. It's being able to automate everything, automate your delivery, automate your testing. The idea is, if you want to be able to deliver a software change as quickly as possible, then you need to have a lot of automation in place. Otherwise, you will sort of make the process longer. Another element of DevOps is this key metrics, which is really important. That's something that people tend to not really focus on, but I think it's quite important, because if you measure where you are, then you can measure improvement. And if you know what to measure, then you can know what to focus on improving. So for us, one of the key metrics that we use is this element of cycle time. It's a measure from when a developer makes a change or picks up a change to when that change is released or deployed to production. And the whole idea is to shorten your cycle time. If you shorten your cycle time, then you know that you have a lot of automated testing or automation in place. The last thing is sharing. So sharing, I mean, there's different elements of sharing. Sharing tools, sharing as a team, communication, collaboration as a team, sharing across different teams' experiences. So you'll see, if you sort of Google, there'll be a lot of information about DevOps and different people's teams, different people's experiences with DevOps, even within an organization. That concept of sharing is really important. And I'm hoping that's what I'm doing here today as well. Another lens through which to look at DevOps is this DevOps tool chain. So it's basically just different key concepts within DevOps that are sort of really important to look at and focus on. The first one is continuous integration, which is, I guess, the core, which is what we talked about earlier, being able to make your little adjustments to the code and test these every time. So you'll probably have heard about having your CI, your continuous integration build set up to run every time a developer makes a change that's kicked off, and then some testing is run on that build to ensure the quality of that build. And this helps to speed up the release process by allowing us to be able to find and fix bugs earlier in that process, earlier in the development cycle. And the whole idea is that the earlier you fix it, the earlier a bug is discovered and fixed, the cheaper it is to fix it, right? If you deliver a bug to production, it's more expensive to fix it. So that's the idea. Continuous delivery, again, which is what we're going to focus on today. This is a process of getting new builds into the hands of users as quickly as possible. So the next step beyond continuous integration. And the whole idea is that you minimize risks associated with releasing software and new features by making releases a less dramatic process or less dramatic events. So like how we were in the olden days, where we had 3 to 4 major releases and everyone held their breath when the release was happening, knowing that things would break in production. You move to this place where doing a release is a natural thing. It's very quick to do. So that's the idea of continuous delivery. We also have this concept of microservices, which again, it's quite an important DevOps thing, but it's not for every team. It's the whole idea of decomposing your business functionality into a set of different sets of independent, self-contained services. And the idea is that these different services communicate with each other through an API. So rather than having one big monolithic application where you deploy the whole application to production every time, your application is broken into these different microservices, and then if you need to make a change in one element, then you could just release the service. And the whole idea is that you break down your big release into sort of lots of small releases. So we've managed to do this to a degree, and it actually makes life so much easier. The other element is infrastructure as code. So the whole idea is being able to provision your environment consistently in a consistent way. How do you do that? Is by defining your environment or your infrastructure through files. So being able to provision your servers, your VM, virtual machines, your databases, or any resources that you need through files, and having this defined and checked into source control. There's lots of different tools that you can use to help you do this. We also have this concept of monitoring and logging, and that's to be able to monitor your application. There's a big focus within DevOps on monitoring your application in production. So once your software is released, you keep an eye on it. You don't just sort of throw it over the fence and forget about it and just leave it to support. Support is meant to be owned by the whole team. So you keep an eye, and maybe you can even predict issues in production before they are reported. So don't always wait for your users to report issues. You can start to see the performance of your application degrading in production, or you see log files filling up, or any other issues. Then you can sort of predict them and respond to them proactively. So here I've listed lots of different benefits of DevOps. I'm sure from everything I've said so far, you could already see how these different benefits can be realized. So I guess the next question is what to do, how to do this. So the main thing I've focused on for today, I guess I've given you an overview of the different areas that you can focus on within DevOps, and there's lots of resources out there. So today I've focused on this continuous delivery pipeline because I feel that that's a really good place to start. I feel like if you have this in place, then it will allow you to be able to realize a lot of those benefits sooner. You have your pipeline in place. There's lots of issues that you can sort of avoid. I've sort of visualized everything here in this on this slide, and then I'll go through the different elements in detail. But the whole idea is you're making a change. The first phase is that you commit that change, and the things that you need to have in place when you commit your change, and then you move on to your state, the next stage, which is your automated acceptance testing. This is where a lot of your more of your tests will run in this phase. I'm sorry, I'll take it one step back. The key at the top is just to show the bits of these stages that we expect to be or are recommended to be automated, and then the element and the bits of this pipeline that are expected to sort of have manual execution. And also the idea is that you start from one end and then you sort of push your builds, or you push your software through the different stages until you get through to production with the different triggers in place. So you build, you commit your changes. That's an automated. You commit your changes, and then you have all these automated tests running, and then you automatically move on to the automated acceptance testing phase. Once all those tests are run, you have sort of different builds available. Then you can choose to move your builds. Those builds have been validated in that stage through to the next stage of testing. So where you can do your exploratory tests, then you can move on to your user acceptance testing. Then you can move on to staging or pre-production. I'm sure you have lots of other different tests to run there, and then you can then choose to push that through to production when you're happy with it. So what I've done here is to go through each of the different phases and talk through, I guess, different tips and guidelines that I will, that I have in terms of setting up these different phases. So the first phase was commit. So you want to have continuous integration builds. I alluded to this earlier. You want to set up your build so that, and this is a quick thing that you can do, so that every time a developer checks in a change, that change is automatically built, right? At the very minimum, build. What's also really, really good and very important to have is your unit test. I know a lot of developers don't like, and there's the whole concept of test-driven development, where you're supposed to, in theory, write your tests before you code a change, and then your test will fail, then you make your change, and then your test pass. But at the very minimum, again, I would recommend having unit tests running on every build, and then you can guarantee that those builds are to some, you can guarantee the quality to some degree. Another thing I would recommend is having quality checks on every single build, so if possible. So there's a lot of tools out there that will help you to do this. So within our team, we use SonarQube. I mean, you get a lot of things for free within SonarQube. Obviously, I mean, when I say for free, I mean, there's a lot of rules, quality checks and rules. It has a whole database of rules for different languages, for us in particular, C++, C#, so many different rules that are there. So if these tools are out there, why not use them? So that I recommend. A key thing I also recommend is looking out for a good CI tool. Again, these tools are out there, use them. There's Azure DevOps, which is absolutely amazing. We're using that for a new project I'm working on, where we're able to, it's a greenfield project, so we're able to start from scratch. It depends on where you are. For a more legacy application, we used TeamCity, and that was because it allowed us the flexibility to be able to define. Our application was quite complex and had complex dependencies, and we found at the time that TeamCity was really good. It was the best that we could find in terms of managing those dependencies between sort of different components. There's a lot of different things out there, so as a good place to start, I would definitely recommend picking a good CI tool. If necessary, use an artifact repository, but I guess this really comes into play if you are delivering your artifacts to other teams, I guess, within your department or something. So Sonar Nexus is a good one. Automate your tests where possible. So I've talked about unit tests already, but there's lots of other ways. I mean, through this pipeline, I've talked about different forms of testing within different phases. So obviously within the commit phase, you've got your unit tests. Within the next phase is your automated acceptance testing. Then you can put in all your other tests. Obviously, the whole idea of unit tests is that they're supposed to be small, they're supposed to be quick, they're supposed to test one specific functionality. Shouldn't really be talking to your database within a unit test. That's not, as soon as you do that, that's not a unit test. So when you've completed all your unit tests, and then you move on to the automated acceptance testing phase, there you can put all the other tests. So I've put integration tests. You can have some feature level tests. You can have component tests. Yeah, lots of other different tests that you can have in that phase. So for us in particular, we have defined lots of different integration tests depending on the way we did it. Was that we went through a period of looking across the whole application, focused on areas where we had lots of different, where we had lots of production issues, I guess, probably because we had lots of developers making changes in those areas. And we defined, we took our manual test packs and converted them into integration tests. So that's where then you can talk to your database and all of that stuff. You can use UI tests where possible, but I said that these can be flaky. That's our experience. They can be quite flaky. So you spend, sometimes you kind of, once you set them up, you can spend a lot of time trying to work out where your issues are, why the tests are failing, or where you get false positives, false negatives. But where you haven't got any other options, where you can't directly test your API, then you can use UI tests. So I know Selenium is quite good for web-based applications. I've also put regression tests as well. That's something that's quite good if for example, your application has lots of different extracts. If you're able to automate your test so that you have a baseline of what you have in production, and then you regenerate your extracts on your new build, and then have a system of comparing them. That's a really good one to have. Next, I will move on to exploratory testing. So this is where you've built your code, you've done all your automated testing, then you can then choose to deploy your application onto a test environment, and then do some form of exploratory tests. I guess this is probably where your unit tests would fit in very well. And this is also where infrastructure as code, which I talked earlier, works really well, because here you're able to mimic your production environment as closely as possible, but then you can use variables to differentiate your environment. So the things that the platform that we use to do that is, on our legacy application, is Excel Deploy. On our sort of more greenfield application, again, we're using Azure DevOps the whole way, but Excel Deploy. And I know there's also Octopus Deploy out there, so it gives you the framework of being able to specify variables for different environments. Another thing actually that's quite good to do is to set quality gates. So I know that SonarQube allows you to do that. So on SonarQube, if you use that if you run sort of static code analysis on your build, you can actually break your build before you even get to this point, or you can set your build up so that it doesn't get to the next stage if it doesn't pass a certain quality gauge, or if the quality doesn't get beyond a certain point. So that's quite good to have as well. Obviously, when you get into UAT, this is where you've put the application in front of your users. Again, your environment will be very similar to production. Your testers can demo features to your users. Your users can test themselves depending on what your setup is. Okay. Oh. Okay, so the next stage is, so a lot of people, I'm hoping, have this sort of staging or pre-production phase. And this is where once you're past UAT, it's sort of your final stage before you go into production. It's as close as possible to your production environment. And then here you can run some additional tests to make sure that your application is in a good state to be able to get into production. So for us in particular, we have these smoke tests that we automate, and we run them literally just before we then push through to production. But again, it's up to you what you put in this phase. I know a lot of teams don't have this staging or production phase. And the next thing is actually pushing your release through to production. And then once you get to production, the whole idea is, again, you don't just leave it to support. You put a lot of monitoring in place. So there's lots of different tools out there that help you to scrape your logs, to be able to identify issues before they get raised by your users. Or you can do a lot of performance monitoring as well. So these, again, all these tools are out there. The whole idea is to help you to visualize your pipeline, identify what you need in the different phases, and then get out there, go hunting, and look for tools that you can use to help you. So what next? What do I recommend? So I recommend completing a maturity assessment. You'll have, if you look online, you'll find lots of different options or different questionnaires that you can fill in. That will ask you different questions about the different phases that I've covered within the pipeline, and then it will churn out an assessment or some kind of scoring, which we did at the beginning of the process, and that will identify areas that you're lacking, and will also recommend areas for you to focus on, or you can focus again on where you think value will be most added. So we tackled 3 different angles. We did the maturity assessment. A couple of areas are flagged up. We focused on those. Then at one point we sort of moved focus away to where we felt the value would be most added. And this was one with getting lots of issues in production. Then we started focusing on, right, okay, we've got our CI set up, we've got our CD set up. Let's now focus on all those gaps that we have in testing. Define the process, or visualize your pipeline. So I've given a template here. Again, if you look online, there's lots of different ways that you can visualize it, but they will, effectively have a lot of those different stages there. But really, in practice, you've also got to make sure that you are, because DevOps brings itself, where in the olden days where you had an operations team that was only solely responsible, or you had proper segregation of duties, I guess then the security was clearer there. But here, where you have an automated pipeline, who's doing what are you securing? Can someone make a change? Can a developer make a change and then push it all the way through to production with no one validating that change? So these are the kind of things that you then need to, when you move towards a DevOps mindset, you need to have a think or be aware that your view or your view of security should change slightly. So the things that we focused on were maintaining code integrity by making sure that we have an audit trail of all code changes. That might seem like an easy thing to do, but you've got to check and make sure that it's there. You've got to try and enforce 4 eyes. Again, this depends on how critical your application is, but for us, we've got business critical application. So enforce 4 eyes for every change into production. So make sure that it is not possible with all this automation in place. It's not possible for one person to make a change and release that to production. There's lots of different things that these tools have in place to allow you to do that. And automate your security testing work. For example, the likes of SonarQube will do some security testing. So it has some security rules in place that will allow you that will highlight any vulnerabilities in your code. So it's useful to have that in place. And try to prevent unauthorized data access as well. So just make sure that although you're automating your whole pipeline, make sure that you are auditing every single step of the process, just so that it's not possible for people to bypass security. And so then DevOps, which is meant to bring you benefits, then ends up creating some security loopholes. And the last thing I will leave you with is this, which is fail fast. It's something that my team say all the time to ourselves. Fail fast, basically that means if you're going to fail fast. Fail when you're in the development stage, fail when you're in the build phase, fail when you're in the automated acceptance testing phase, so that you're able to fix changes there and not have to deal with fixing them in production. Okay, I hope through today I've been able to demonstrate the benefits of DevOps and how you can practically set up a continuous delivery pipeline, and that will hopefully help you guys to go delivering quality software faster. Can I take any questions?
Yes, so we'll open up the chat for questions now. Thank you very much, Ehiaghe, for this. I like how direct it was, and covered as much basis as you could within the short time that we have. So guys, if you have questions, please type in your questions, and everybody, and I will read out your questions to Ehiaghe, and she can answer the questions. But first, I'd like to ask though, I noticed Agile and DevOps are quite similar. I mean,
Yeah.
would you say it's an on Agile, or any professional currently working with the Agile methodology should be looking to move on to DevOps within the next 6 months, next 1 year? Would you say that's the future of development?
I would say definitely. I think DevOps is, in my view, is Agile plus plus. It's kind of like a natural progression of Agile. It's like, because as I mentioned earlier, Agile promises you a potentially shippable product. That's great, but then you can still deliver a change to your user in 3 months. But what the user wants to see, or what our users want, is that they want something and they want it now. I know that it's difficult because in some change, depending on the nature of what you're delivering, some things do take a long time. And where you're not able to deliver things to production, okay, fine, that's okay. But what we've done in the past is, rather than waiting 3 months to deliver an application, we might deliver the application all the way through to production, but only allow a couple of people to use it. Or we'll deliver the shell of the application so that we've proven every step of the process you're actually delivering, so that you know that every new field feature that you build can go all the way through to production. So rather than waiting those 3 months or however long it takes. So yeah, to answer your question, DevOps is definitely a progression, a natural progression of Agile. And I think that people should move on to DevOps. There's so many benefits of it. Definitely.
Okay. Okay. Then one more thing, I was looking if can you put up like a real life case scenario if you are looking to release a financial app or something that works on investment. Uh, what's the difference, or how would Agile normally would progress, and how would DevOps naturally progress? Can you give us like a real life scenario of
Okay.
thought?
So I'll give you an example of something that we are working on. So we're working on building a new application in response to a regulatory change. So this is the greenfield application that I said that we're working on at the moment, where we're using Azure DevOps pipeline. So what Agile brings us is, it brings us the way in which we structure our delivery. So we have the requirement that's come out of the project. As the product owner / scrum master, I've sat down with the business analyst and we've broken those changes up into manageable chunks. So remember, I was talking about breaking a change up into user stories. So we've broken them up into manageable chunks. We've populated a backlog. So we've got a backlog of about, say, 50 changes, which are placeholders for all the features that we know need to be delivered for the application. What we've done is that we then prioritize that with our users. And then the most important features, this is still Agile. We haven't talked about DevOps yet. But the most important features get to the top, and then we then plan our iterations. We plan what we want to deliver every couple of weeks, every fortnight. Okay? And then we start working through in these iterations, still having our daily stand-ups with the users. So these are the different things that Agile brings you: the collaboration, your daily stand-ups with a team, demo to the users. Now, where DevOps features or comes in is that we as a team, we are the delivery team, we're responsible for delivering this feature to production. So at the start of our process, or as early as possible within the process, we set up our pipeline, including all the different stages that I've shown, this continuous delivery pipeline, so that we're able to release anything that we deliver through that has been QA'd or signed up by the user into production. So we've got our backlog set up. We're working through iterations. At the end of every iteration, we demo changes to our users. Bear in mind that all the automated testing and everything has happened beyond in the process. At the point at which a user signs off those changes, we're able to release it to production because we set a pipeline up with all the automated testing in place. So that's kind of how DevOps and Agile complement each other.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And so we have a question from Adedela Paula from Okorocha, and it says,
Yep.
I have a dev and cloud background looking to move into DevOps. What training path do you suggest to achieve?
Sorry. Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Ehiaghe. I have a dev and Azure cloud background looking to move into DevOps. What training path do you suggest to achieve this?
That's a very good question. I tell you what we've done, a couple of different things. So I would say that there's a lot of resources out there in terms of Googling, but that's actually not what we've done. What we've done is that we've, as an organization, have invested in DevOps coaches. So we've had people come in, look at our current processes. They've given us tips, suggested ways that we can move forward. They facilitated us, filling out this questionnaires. They've facilitated us running through what I didn't mention it today, but it's a value stream map, which is a way of sort of mapping out your process and identifying where the bottlenecks are and how you can improve them. I'll also say that Azure is a really good place to start, because Azure DevOps, I mean, Microsoft have invested heavily in DevOps to the point where they've renamed what used to be called TFS release, they've renamed it Azure DevOps. It's basically got everything there for you. So if you've got an Azure background, I would just keep looking at Microsoft resources, because there's so much stuff out there. You can even create your own. I don't know how much you do, how much we all love our jobs. I don't know how much time people spend coding at home, but you can play around with this stuff with all the pipelines in at home within with your own environment. So I would definitely recommend a combination of those. I'd recommend looking online for resources. I would recommend, if possible, if your organization is able to provide one, get a DevOps coach. But I'd also recommend, particularly with Microsoft, they have a lot of they've invested heavily in this, and they've got a lot of resources on their web pages. So I would recommend looking there as well.
Okay. Are there any certifications though?
I am not aware of any DevOps certifications. No.
Okay, and the next question is from Tulu Adelo.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Tulu Adelo says, where does the software documentation come to play in this process?
Really good question. Because Agile seems to move away from documentation. Okay, in a way, your pipeline kind of documents your process. If you've got your pipeline set up, it's almost self-documenting. If you've got your infrastructure as code, that's self-documenting as well. But I would DevOps doesn't take away from documentation. I think, if you've got an application, you've got a wiki page about it, yep, put you keep it up to date. If you have a project, you want to document your requirements, or you need to you have your functional requirements document, or your technical specification documents. Those things still hold. DevOps doesn't take away from it. DevOps, the focus of DevOps is in actually delivery of your application into production. It's more like accelerating your delivery. And ensuring the quality of what you're delivering, as opposed to, it doesn't take away from your software documentation. But again, in the olden days where you had a server which you cobbled together, you didn't even know what you had installed in it and all that kind of stuff, that takes away from that. Because, for example, for us, with all our VMs, we have we're able to automate setting up we take a brand new virtual machine, and we're able to automate setting up that machine with all the software that it needs to be able to run our application, because we've gone through the whole infrastructure as code. We've documented this stuff. So in a way, then when it comes to setting up a new VM, you don't need to do anything. You just click a button and go. So it takes some of those things that you would have to document, because you were doing everything manually in the olden days. With your new tooling or your new setup, you don't have to. You'll just, it's all self-documenting. I hope that answers your question.
Hopefully it does. And then it says here, or Jim says, please, can you emphasize more on the metrics meant to be measured at certain stages of the pipeline? Example of metrics needed to be measured on certain stages of the pipeline. Yeah, thank you.
That's a good question. Good question. For us in particular, our key focus, there were a handful. I'm going to see if I can find any. There were a handful of metrics that we were recommended by our DevOps coach, but the key one that we focused on was, they were all, some of them were quite similar, but the key one that we focused on was that measurement of cycle time. which was measurement from when you've got a few. You've got cycle time, which is a measurement from when a developer picks up a change to when it's deployed in production. Another one was deploy time, which is the time from when a code is checked in to when it's deployed in production. They were all sort of quite similar. So that's why we kind of did away with all the others and we focused on cycle time. Cycle time for us was key. I'm going to have a quick look to see if I can find any other metrics. We had lead time, which was the time from when an issue was raised to when it was released in production. So like I said, these are all quite similar. So we're like, okay, lead time, we have like a lot of PBIs or product backlog items that are sit on our backlog for such a long time. Why there's no measuring a change that was raised like 3 years ago, but no one, it's not prioritized to when it's released. It doesn't really add value to us. So for us, we focus on that whole, someone picks up a change, it's released. Yeah. Sorry, there's other metrics that you can have. For example, obviously you have your velocity, but that doesn't really add value, I don't think, to your delivery. The number of releases, it could be another one, but again, that's a bit skewed because you can certify. I want to increase the number of releases, but are you increasing the number of releases because you have more production issues? Not quite sure. So that it depends on your nature of your application. That's why I keep going back to cycle time as a really good one.
Right. Okay. I think somebody's typing. I hope it's one more question. And so, do you have any more questions? I'd like to end it early, but yeah, that's the question. What are the major skills needed to succeed in DevOps?
What are the major skills needed to succeed in DevOps? I think one of them is a can-do attitude, because DevOps sort of moves away from those silos of being a business analyst, or being a tester, or being the ops guy, or focusing on support. It kind of requires a change of your mindset. So, another thing that, another concept that DevOps brought was this concept of a T-shaped profile. If you Google it, you'll see them being talked about, where you have your core focus, so that sort of the long bit, your core focus is as a developer, for example, but then the T, the horizontal bit is you being able to, even though your core focus is being a developer, you're able to do a bit of testing, or a bit of support, or a bit of something else. Something that my team members used to say, which is, if you put a developer on support, if you have a recurring issue in production, and support keeps patching, and you put a developer on support, don't just give him the issue to fix, put him on support, that issue will get fixed very quickly. Because if you have a developer on support, he gets annoyed by this issue. He's like, what is this happening? Why is this happening all the time? I'm going to just fix this. So the whole idea is I think, is having a can-do attitude, being able, being of the mindset to dabble in different things. Don't just think, oh, I'm a developer, that's it, I don't want to look at anything else, I don't want to test, I don't want to support. Change your mindset. That's why with the DevOps core values, culture is a big part of it. Being collaborative, being able to work closely with all these different team members, and just because you're, for example, with this new application we're developing on Azure, we're going to have to move away from having, the DBAs do all our dirty work for us. We're going to have to do that. We're going to have to manage, we've got a Azure database. We're going to have to manage that database ourselves. So again, it's moving away from that whole, I'm a developer, I don't do anything else beyond that. So that's my key recommendation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ehiaghe, for absolutely answering the questions, and then the in-depth analysis and guidance on the topic. Thanks a lot, guys, for taking our time to attend the webinar too. We're really appreciative of your attendance, and we're open to have you guys on our next webinar episode. Thanks a lot again. We're glad to have you.
Thanks.
All right, guys.
Bye.